my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel. So I have finally narrowed down my list of top 10 books for the year, but I also have a whole bunch of honorable mentions, and I was gonna just do that in that same video, but then my list of honorable mentions got like really long, so I decided just to do a separate video for it so that it's not too much in one video. When I talk about my top 10, it can just be my top 10. So we're here to talk about the books that almost made it my top 10 of the year, but not quite, but I still really enjoyed and would 100% recommend. So I think I have 15 books on this list, but we're just gonna go ahead and get right into it with the first one, which is A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. I definitely was not expecting to love this as much as I did. This is about a girl who supposedly is possessed by a demon, and her family is kind of having a hard time financially, so they agree to let this film crew come in and make basically a TV show and document everything that's happening to their daughter. It was very fun, very creepy. A lot of it focuses on the family and the relationships within the family, which I really enjoyed. The story is told in a very interesting way as well, because we are hearing it in the future when the sister of this girl is now an adult and she is telling the story of what happened, but then we also get like snippets from this blog that is talking about the show, and then we get a lot of just different moments from the actual filming of it and the TV show that they make from it. So it was very interesting. This one was a strong read all throughout, but it was the end that really pulled it together for me. So I'm very happy that I read this book, and I'm very happy that I really enjoyed it. The next one is The Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. This one became an all-time favorite of mine after reading it. This is a thriller, if you want to call it that, although I wouldn't say it's particularly very thrilling, but we are following this man and his young daughter, and they live in this house, this cabin in the middle of nowhere. They have one neighbor, and that's all we know. We know something happened in the past that made this man have to run away and stay away from society, but we're not sure what that thing is yet. This is definitely a very emotional book. Like I said, it's very much focused on family and relationships, and it may make you tear up. It made me tear up a little bit towards the end, but I thoroughly enjoyed the story and the way that it was told, and that's all I'm going to say about that one. The next one also became an all-time favorite of mine this year, and that is Intercepts by TJ Payne, which is a horror book about this man that works at this, like, how is it described? A facility where they have like experimental things happening to humans. Sort of like if you think of the lab in Stranger Things and how they are like doing all these experiments with the children and trying to get them to do crazy things and superhuman things, I guess, if you want to describe it like that. Intercepts kind of has the same thing going on. But then it gets a little bit crazy, and it's very interesting. You're following primarily a man and his daughter, and the man, like I said, works for this company, but it's very interesting because you want to root for him and his daughter, and you want to make sure that they're okay because you get connected to them in the story, but then you also want to root for the people that are fighting against them, which I can't really explain why, but just read it. The opening chapter is absolutely fantastic, very descriptive of things that are happening within this facility, and I really enjoyed the way that it was written and kept me on the edge of my seat, and couldn't recommend it enough. The next one is Finna by Nino Cipri. This one I wasn't expecting to love as much as I did. Again, this is a very short novella. It is a sci-fi novella, and it's kind of like Horror Store by Grady Hendrix, but better in my opinion. We're basically following this character that works in an IKEA-esque furniture store, and it's just like a common thing that portals will open up in these stores, and sometimes people will get lost in the portals and find themselves in a different dimension. So this happens one day. This woman goes missing in the store, and they're like, oh, she's in this wormhole, so you two employees have to go after her and find her, and they use this device called Finna to locate this woman. And it's really interesting too because it says like if the woman's no longer alive, then you just have to find a suitable replacement. It's just very interesting. If you like sci-fi that has to do with that type of thing, like portals to different dimensions and wormholes and things like that. It was very, very fun and very entertaining, and I think anybody who's ever worked in like retail or a minimum wage job where you have to deal with customers can definitely relate to everything that happened in this book. Thoroughly recommend, thoroughly enjoyed. Next is The Trees Grew Because I Bled There by Eric LaRocca, which is a short story collection. I believe this was recently published. I believe it was published before under a different name and then was recently republished under this name. I absolutely enjoyed every single story in this collection. I just love Eric LaRocca's writing to begin with, but this one in particular really stood out to me out of all the things that I read from him this year. I really, really enjoyed the story in here that is called Bodies Are Made for Burning, I believe. That is one that I still think about to this day, have not forgotten that story yet, and I read this months ago at the beginning of the year, so I think that's a good sign. So if you've never read from Eric LaRocca before, but you want to kind of dip your toes in and get a little feel for the type of things that he writes, I would definitely recommend this because obviously a short story collection is a great way to learn about an author's writing style and some of the topics that they enjoy writing about. So I would totally recommend this, whether you have or haven't read from him before. Moving on, the next one is The Quiet Tenant by Clemence Michelon. I believe that is how you pronounce it. This book, I started it, got a few pages in, and then immediately regretted the fact that I was reading a library copy and didn't have my own copy to annotate, because it was written absolutely beautifully and left you with a lot of things to think about. So The Quiet Tenant is essentially about this man who is a kidnapper and serial killer, and we are hearing his story from the point of view of 3 different women surrounding him. One of the point of views is of a woman that he has held captive, and he actually hasn't killed her yet, which is very interesting because everybody else he has killed pretty quickly, but he has held on to this woman for some reason. So we are hearing the story from that point of view, and then 2 other point of views, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. This is very similar to the way like Notes on an Execution is, where we are following once again a man who's a murderer, but we're hearing his story through different women in his life. And I absolutely love Notes on an Execution, and I really, really enjoyed this one as well, and I would definitely recommend it if you I feel like even if you didn't love Notes on an Execution, but you wanted to love the concept of it, then definitely try this one. Towards the later part, when a lot of the more thrilling aspects start coming in and you start to be like, oh my god, like something's gonna happen, what's gonna happen, how is this all gonna play out? Like you are definitely on the edge of your seat, and it was really, really fun. Like I said, there are a lot of things to think about that are talked about in the book, and a lot of things that I would have annotated if I had my own physical copy. The next one is Mr. Magic by Kirsten White. I am so glad that I read this book. This has, I feel like, a lot of aspects that I really, really enjoy when it comes to horror. There is social commentary in here. There are creepy children. There is sort of a mixed media aspect with like these Reddit forum discussions that are happening, and like Twitter, like tweets. Well, obviously, Twitter tweets. That didn't make any sense, but you guys know what I mean. This is about a group of children who was on this show called Mr. Magic when they were kids, and then now they're adults, but there is no evidence to suggest that the show actually existed. Like, there are no known recordings of it or anything like that. However, we have this group of kids that was on the show, and then we have a lot of people in the world that remember the show and remember watching it, remember certain moments from it, but can't ever find recordings of it. So that's where the like Reddit discussions come in. It was fascinating. I absolutely loved it. It goes a little bit of like a kind of fantastical way towards the end, but I really, really enjoyed it. The whole thing throughout gives you this very creepy and unsettling feeling, and it was just everything that I wanted. This one I actually read as an ARC through NetGalley and then bought the copy later on because I loved it that much. The next one is Brother by Anya Alborn, which is absolutely fantastic, and I wish I owned this one too. This is about this family of like cannibalistic serial killers, but there is one son that is a part of this family that doesn't want to take part in what they do anymore. So we are following his story and really just the story of the entire family, and it is dark and creepy and very, very unsettling, and it just gives you this feeling like, I don't know how to explain it, but like the feeling that you want when you're reading something that's horror, because you're just thoroughly creeped out and disturbed by it. It is graphic and it is brutal, and I think Anya Alborn is a fantastic author. I definitely have to read more from her in this next year because everything that I have read from her I've really, really enjoyed. The next one is Ascension by Nicholas Binge. This is like a sci-fi horror. Basically, this story is told in a bunch of letters about this incident that happened where all of a sudden this snow-covered mountain appears in the middle of the ocean, and nobody knows how it got there, how it wasn't detected before, and how it literally just appeared like overnight. So we have this group of researchers that is sent onto the mountain to kind of figure out anything that they can about it, about what it's made from, what is there, if there's anything like there for them to find. And I really, really enjoyed the like sci-fi elements of it. The way that it plays with time is absolutely fascinating. There is a lot of horror elements as well with different creatures on the mountain, and I just really, really love this one. I wish that I could wipe this book from my memory and go back and read it for the first time again because I thought it was absolutely fantastic. There was one little thing in it that I read it and it just made me giggle because it was just a little bit cheesy. It was a reveal of something, but that's spoilers, so I can't give that away. But as far as sci-fi horror goes, this one is definitely one of my favorites, and I'm absolutely obsessed with the cover. Like, I need to own a physical copy because it's just absolutely gorgeous. Next up is Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. This one is also an all-time favorite of mine, and this is one of the few books that has actually truly scared me while I was reading it. And I think the reason for that is because it started on Reddit, on the No Sleep Reddit, which I used to read all the time. So if you are a fan of reading those, or if you're a fan of creepypastas, then I definitely think you will enjoy this book. We are following this couple and they go to this like cabin in the mountain just to get away and have some time to themselves. And the woman starts to speak with things in her sleep, and at first the boyfriend thinks, oh, she's just talking in her sleep, but then he realizes that she is actually answering back to something else that is outside of the cabin. So it's definitely got a lot of creature horror and like creepy woods and creepy mountain things, and just a lot of creepy descriptions. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just, I was thoroughly creeped out while reading this book, like actually scared, and I absolutely loved it. The next one is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. First of all, she announced that she has another book coming out, and I'm really, really excited to read it. But anyways, A Certain Hunger is about this woman who we know is in prison for killing people. So throughout the story, she is telling us who she killed and how she killed them, and then what she did with their bodies after, because she is a cannibal. And I thought it was absolutely fascinating. It's very like stream of consciousness written, and it's definitely, a lot of people compare it to American Psycho, and I can definitely see the comparison in it because it is just very long-winded at times when you're just reading it inside of her mind. But I think it's absolutely fascinating the way that it's done, and I just really, one of my favorite parts about this book is like reading the way that she would talk about cooking their bodies afterwards. Like, she would have these like detailed recipes and like talk about how she would cook certain body parts and like what she would eat them with and the recipe she would follow, and I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. There's also a little bit of like social commentary in here about feminism and being a woman, and I thought it was really, really good. So I'm very excited to read from Chelsea G. Summers again in the future and see what else she has to come up with. This one is an unexpected winner for me. Speaking of unexpected winners, these next two were probably my most surprising favorites of the year. A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury. I still have to read the rest of the series, but I decided to try fantasy this year. I did a whole vlog about it, and I read this one in it and absolutely loved it. way more than I thought I would. I was absolutely terrified to ever read this book, and I'm so glad that I did. I just really, really love the romanticy of this. I love the world that they're in and the descriptions of everything. I love the fays and the fairies. That has always been something that I've loved since a kid. So I don't know why it took me so long to read these, but now I can say that I love them and I am not so afraid to read fantasy anymore. This one in particular though, the freaking romance in this book is like to die for. And that is not a sentence I ever thought I would say. Moving on now, we have Help Me by Nabin Rusnam. I always get thrown off by his name. I don't know why. I think it's because I always want to say Nathan, but that's not his name. Anyways, this is a relatively like lesser known book and I would highly recommend it. This is one that I have not stopped thinking about since I read it because the way that the horror goes at the end, or even just like the beginning of it, I feel like is very much horror that I enjoy. This has a very gothic feel. This takes place, I believe, in the year 1900 and we have this woman whose husband is very sick and his sickness comes with a lot of descriptive body horror, like absolutely disgusting, repulsive, but in the best way possible. And we're just following his journey and then it just turns into something just absolutely crazy. I will say if you are a fan of horror that is more reality based, then you probably won't enjoy the direction that this book goes, but anybody that loves things that get weird and unhinged and crazy, definitely read this. It is a novella. However, at no point during it does it really feel like a novella because I don't know how the author did it, but he packs in so much words and so much descriptions and so much action that it feels like a full-length novel, but it's really not. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Sometimes you'll read a book and you'll be like, oh, this feels like it's 600 pages long. But I mean the fact that he packed in so much detail and just so much story into this short book is absolutely astounding to me. Like literally a magician. I don't know how he did it. 100% please, if you read any book from this list, let it be this one because I want more people to love this book and talk about it because it's just, like I said, it literally has not left my mind since I've read it. And the last one is another little surprising one because this author I haven't always been a fan of, but that is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I don't know what it is about this book, but I really enjoyed it. So this is about a woman who goes to be a caregiver, like an in-home, I think she's a nurse. Maybe she's not a nurse, but an in-home caregiver for this woman who lives up in this big mansion on the side of a mountain, as you can tell from the cover. And this woman is accused of killing her family because basically there was this incident that occurred where everybody in our family died. She was the sole survivor, and obviously people believe that she's the one that killed them. So now we are following the woman who goes to care for her and start to learn her story and unravel more of what actually happened. And it's absolutely fascinating. It takes you for a wild ride. There are so many different twists and turns and reveals in this book, but I thought it was so fun. Really loved it. I really loved the atmosphere as well of this big mansion. It takes place in the 80s. We're in this like kind of isolated place. We have a very limited cast of characters. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. It was fun and silly, and sometimes that's what you need in a thriller. Okay, so those are the books that almost made it into my top 10, but not quite. So stay tuned because my top 10 will be coming pretty soon. Let me know if you guys have read any of these, if you have loved or even hated any of these. And with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I will see you next time.